All right, everybody. Thanks for joining. Today's session is called Add Teams Functionality to Your Apps using Azure Communication Services. My name is Hugo Bernier. I'm a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, and I like to call myself the world's laziest developer. So you'll see today some of the solutions I'll be talking to you about really leverage the lowest effort in ways that you can actually do some really cool functionality to your applications, whether they're desktop apps or mobile apps or web-based apps, and add some rich functionality like Teams, as well as some other things that you can do. So let's get started. So if you think about the current scenario, right? COVID has affected a lot of people. It has changed how we do our daily activities. Even now that, we're arguably in a recovery phase, we used to go to the bank and we used to go meet with our bankers to get a loan or to get a mortgage. Or maybe we met with our life insurance provider, right, to get a new life insurance. Or whatever those experiences were that required us to go in person into an organization and meet with them. Think about, again, buying a car or something like that. But in the COVID world, we had to change things, right? We had to continue doing our business without being in person. And so, how does the experience look like in a post-COVID world, in a 2022 world? So I'll give you an example of something that I actually built for a client. Now, the version I'm going to show you is a sanitized version of it that I just quickly put together, but hopefully it'll give you an example of what we've done here. So we'll go to our fictitious website here. The bank is called Banca. And, as a customer, I want to get a loan. Now, this is a authenticated portal. So I've already logged in as a customer here, and I can actually just apply for a loan, which you normally would be able to do in a banking situation, right? So I'll just quickly fill this up. And by the way, I pre-recorded this demo because it's very difficult to show multiple screens of Teams inside of a live Teams meeting. But let's pretend that I'm filling in the information here for my mortgage. There you go, and I apply. So this is still just normal mortgage application. But now when I click on submit, one of the things that it does is it takes me to a new page that says, hey, we've booked an appointment for you, as well as kind of a calendar entry. And when you come back to that calendar entry, or you come back the day of your meeting, you now have the ability to click on join meeting. And when you click on join meeting, it actually takes you within that portal. It takes you to a page that's got like the rich functionality here, like support for Teams and things like that. But actually allows you to start a communication, select your devices. So I have a few cameras here. So select your devices and then start a call. Maybe I'll turn on my camera. There you go. So start a call. And now, again, I haven't left the bank site here. I'm still within the bank, but I'm actually starting a Teams call. And you'll see at the other end, this is still me, but we'll pretend that I'm the loan officer here. And I accept the person to be admitted into the call. So now we'll get 2 instances of me. And right now, if you're counting, there's 3 instances of me on the chat, where we're, one person is actually a customer at the bank, one person is a loan officer at the bank, and I've been able to do this without installing Teams, without having special things like, if you remember the good old days where I had to have ActiveX installed or some weird technology like that. And I was able to actually share my screen, share my video, chat, do all that stuff. So that's kind of the vision of the future. How would I do that? Well, this is where we can use something called Azure Communication Services. And Azure Communication Services really allows you to do a whole bunch of things. It's not just Teams functionality, it's a whole bunch of things. But let's talk about what those things are, right? And the first thing is with Azure Communication Services, I can actually add voice and video calling, including Teams. And that's really what I'm going to be focusing on today. But, this is kind of a rich functionality that you can use for things like addressing. So you can actually generate you can use generic identities to authenticate, or in my case of a customer that's logging into an online banking portal, maybe I'm actually using a different type of identity, but I'm not giving those external users access to my teams. I'm actually kind of creating an identity for them that they can securely connect to that meeting without having to create a user ID and a password inside of Active Directory or things like that. Azure Communication Services will make sure that everything is encrypted through and through, right? So the SDK that makes the calls encrypts the traffic and it prevents tampering on the wire. It supports for things like managing your devices. You saw when I started the call, I had the ability to choose my audio, video settings. Now you can completely customize that. So let's say if you're building a kiosk, maybe you probably wouldn't want users to be prompted to choose the device because it would be intended to be a kiosk. But in another situation where you want the user to be able to pick the devices they want, or you want to default to some devices, you could absolutely do that as well. There's support for PSTN as well. So people that need to initiate voice calls over the traditional, PSTN is public switch telephony system. So you can actually use phone numbers. You can get phone numbers in the Azure portal, and I'll show you how to do that. Or you can actually programmatically acquire some numbers to scale as much as you need. Now, the key to this also is using Teams meetings. So you can join Teams meeting, you can initiate Teams meeting, and interact with Teams functionality, including voice, the video data plane, as well as sharing files and chat and things like that. And notifications. So I can actually allow the clients that are using the functionality to be notified and to interact basically with things like incoming calls, right? Or if the app is not running in the background, you can actually use different patterns like pop-ups and things like that, or toast, right? That people know so that we can actually notify our users that things are happening. Now, all this goodness and I took a screenshot of this here because I didn't want to have to retype this, but one thing that you'll notice is Azure Communication Services is available for JavaScript, Windows through .NET, Java, and Objective-C for both Android and iOS support. And the majority of functionality that's available is consistently available kind of throughout. It's the same pretty much for everything. And I'm not going to go through every single feature here. I always take pride of not being a person that talks about features, but I talk about the value, right? So lots of cool stuff that we can do here. The ability to turn on, turn off videos, muting, unmuting, all that stuff. That's all there, and that's all built in pretty much for every flavor of Azure Communication Services that you can use. Now, if I scroll a little bit down, and I know I skipped a lot here, but there's some other things that are not necessarily available in every platform, right? So, for example, getting the list of microphones, setting the microphone and things like that, because it will assume on a mobile device that you only have one microphone available. But you can pick a camera because you might have the forward-facing camera or the rear-facing camera, and so on and so forth. But that's just for one part of Azure Communication Services. There's another part here that Azure Communication Services allows you to do. It's the ability to do rich text chat. So this is the ability to add like real-time text communication to your cross-platform communications. And you can do some, again, we've talked about some of the features like custom identity and addressing and encryption and support for Teams meeting. That's all there. But again, the ability for you to do real-time notifications. So I can have these pop-ups that say, hey, you just received a message. but also the ability to integrate with different services and different bot to actually kind of integrate with the bot framework if you want to. That's something that you can build in your apps right now. Again, that chart of all the cool features. And again, I want you to see that across JavaScript, Java, .NET, Python, iOS, and Android, you can actually leverage a lot of the functionality. There's some things that are not quite available in every platform, like, for example, getting notification when people are typing. But again, for most of the functionality, that's consistent across the board. And then things like real-time notifications and push and things like that. But again, you can see this is pretty rich. There's lots of cool stuff that I can do, and I can really give that rich experience to my applications by using something like Azure Communication Services. There's also SMS support. SMS, it feels like we're going back in time. We're talking about SMS, but the ability to send short messages through kind of the good old PSTN, SMS and inbound or outbound messages. So you can actually generate phone numbers that will receive messages, and then you can connect to, let's say, a service bus or something to actually, when you receive a message, to do something with it. Or you can also generate messages out, which is very cool. And some of the things that we can talk about, again, it's super easy to set up. You can handle like really high velocity. You can send bulk messages. You can do two-way conversations, as well as something that's you might not see always in these technologies is kind of that reliable delivery, where you can make sure that the message actually goes through. And then analytics, right? Are people actually listening or reading the messages? And because we have to be compliant, the ability to opt out from automated messages and things like that. So same thing here. We've got lots of functionality that's consistent across the board. I'm not going to go through all this stuff, but again, like think about how I could create a webhook or an event grid that would react to incoming text messages and things like that. I remember in 2001 building functionality I wanted to make SharePoint available on a mobile device. And so you could actually search for SharePoint through SMS, and we had to buy an array of Nokia phones, $19 Nokia phones with $100 Nokia cables to connect to a computer. And we would do the same thing here. And it was super complicated to do this way back then, but now it's super easy for you to provision a service to be able to actually react to queries being made over a mobile device through SMS. But wait, if you order now, you also get the ability to do kind of identity and authentication. Now, the cool thing about that is, again, all the services that are being made, all the calls that are being made are done in a way that they are authenticated and secure. Now, you might say, well, I don't want my end customers to have an identity, and that's perfectly fine because you can generate tokens for those users temporarily. But you can also, the cool thing about this is you can also map, instead of duplicating all the information in your system, you're able to map a relationship that as your business needs kind of come up, right? So if you've got different identities, whether it's Active Directory or Azure AD, maybe B2C identities and things like that, you can actually kind of map these identities to identities in your Azure Communication Services. That way, if you're enabling this app to be used by your internal employees, they can actually kind of log in as themselves, or they're usually not prompted to log in, but that they're acting as themselves. But if they're a user, maybe there's a custom identity that's generated just for them to make sure that we're not talking about banking information to the wrong people. Okay, so we'll talk about that, but it all relies on getting access tokens and then using those access tokens back and forth to authenticate the messages. And then, like all good things, you should always look at monitoring and analyzing. because you're going to plan, we think we're going to do this, you're going to monitor, and then you're going to adapt. So you're going to find out that, hey, maybe we should change the frequency of how often we send text messages, or whatever. We should change the behavior here to do this. Again, all this stuff integrates with Azure services. So Azure App Insights, Azure event logs and things like that. So you can go to the log analytics workspace, the event hubs, the Azure storage, and integrate with all that stuff and really control where this information goes and how it is used. So all this stuff, you can kind of find all this stuff if you go to, I have the link in the bottom here, but docs.microsoft.com/Azure/communication services. And it gives you a whole bunch of quick starts. And the one thing that I want to say, and this may seem overwhelming because I know I'm going to go quickly through the rest of the stuff here, but trust me, if I can do it, pretty much anybody can do it. It is not that overwhelming. And the great thing about that is that the team, the ACS team, has done an amazing job. And I'm not part of that team, full disclosure. I'm not part of that team, but they've done a really good job at documenting every service and creating awesome samples for pretty much every platform that you can almost use. I don't want to say as is, but let's just say that the majority of my solutions that are built using Azure Communication Services are very, very close to the actual samples that were provided by the team. And that's a testament to the hard work that they've done as a team. So if I wanted to set up an ACS, Azure Communication Services, I would go to my Azure subscription, right, portal.azure.com, and I would just kind of go create a new service. So let's do that. So I create a new resource, and when you create the new resource, I tend to not want to scroll through, so I'll just search usually for something like communication. If I can type communication, and then I will pick the first one that comes up, which is communication services. You just have to click on create to create it. And let's just do that. So you can look at the plans, right? Azure Communication Services honestly is is designed to be affordable and is designed to be large volumes. So like I always pick the basic plan here for this. And I'll just pick the random location and name. And then once my deployment is complete, I should be taken to a page that looks like this here. And right away from here, I'm able to get started and do something useful. Right? And you saw the 3 areas of functionality I talked about: the chat ability, the telephony and SMS, and the voice and video calling. There's already a start, whatever that's called, a quick start for each one of them. And there's a call to action. So I'll just follow the example, for example, of the voice and video calling to show you how easy it is to add voice and video calling to your app. Now, I'm going to be switching back and forth between web, Android, iOS, and Windows, just because I wanted you to see that it's possible to do it any platform. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, I want to use Azure Communication Services inside of my Power Apps portal or inside of Power Apps. That's perfectly fine, because if you look at how these technologies are enabled, the web technology is really using Node.js behind the scenes. And so you can create a PCF control for Power Platform that you could use to embed some of this functionality into a Power App. That's something that I've done in the past where I've embedded PCF, or actually I didn't even need to use PCF, but I've embedded Azure Communication Services into a Power Apps portal. In fact, the demo that I showed you earlier was based on a Power App portal. So I'll just start with web, but we'll switch back and forth here. And then you'll see that for every area, like again, I'm focusing on voice and video calling, you'll see that I have all the samples on how to add voice, how to add video, Teams, joining a call, and then use some of the call automations for things like recording of calls and raw media access. And I'll show you some actual examples of that. So regardless of the platform that you use, when you start coding, it's pretty much always the same thing, whether you're using NuGet in a C# or .NET platform, or using something like Node.js here, you just import the libraries that are required. Usually you'll need at very least communication calling and communication common. And then what it'll ask you to do, there's a few ways that you can connect. The first way, which is usually my favorite way when I want to get started quickly, is to use a communication services connection string. I know it feels like 1990 and we're connecting using connection strings again, but it's actually pretty powerful. So if I go back to the portal, I can actually go find where my connection string by simply going to my keys. And I'm not going to share my connection string, but you can see I got the values here. It generates 2 keys for you, and you can regenerate them. But I'll just copy the connection string. I'll go paste it into my code, or like most samples show you, is to create an environment variable for that. Now, another way you can do this is you can actually use an endpoint and an access key. So if you don't like to use a connection string, that's perfectly fine. Same idea though, you can go to the portal and you can actually go to your endpoint, which is usually listed at the top here. So your endpoint is right here. So you can copy that. And remember, this is Azure, so you always have a handy little copy button right there. And your access tokens, the portal actually allows you to generate test access tokens, and there's code for you to actually go generate dynamic access tokens. But I always use this to quickly test and make sure that everything is working fine. So I would copy the access token, and if you want to copy the access token that's there, by all means, go crazy. It will expire a bit later today. All right, the third way to connect, if you're already using, you're aiming this for users that are already connected using Azure credentials, let's say your existing Teams users, you can just use the default Azure credential and it will map. Then all you have to do is you have to make sure that once you've got an identity, you get a token, because that token is what's going to be used to kind of to scope all the calls going back and forth between Azure Communication Services. That's the same approach for pretty much every single piece of functionality in the system. Now, because I want to make a call, in this particular case, there's an object called a call client. So I can actually instantiate a call client, pass all my tokens and things like that, and then do some settings like, you know, how to react to incoming calls and things like that. The samples actually provide you kind of really show you how to use every piece of functionality here. But you see, all I have to do is to pass my access token and do things like, do I want to enable video and audio? It's pretty straightforward. Now, if I want to join meetings or add other people to meetings or things like that, normally what I would use is I would use something called a call agent. And a call agent, really all it is, it's kind of the orchestrator for your calls. So this is the thing that's going to be kind of your main entry point for all the calling SDKs. And you will just use the create call agent to create the call agent. And then you will use that to do things like, join a call or do things like that. In fact, this is what we're doing here. We're calling a join agent. We're passing a join link. And for the join link, you can actually use the regular Teams join links, like the one that you use to actually join this call. The cool thing about that is, and a lot of people don't know this, but really a call link for Teams is really kind of a series of GUID generated things, but they're, I think they're URL encoded or base64 encoded on the URL. So it doesn't look like it's a GUID, but it's really a GUID for the call that makes it unique. And there's a GUID for the chat thread so that we can identify where the conversations are going to go. So you can dynamically generate those, or you can call Graph, the Graph APIs. And there's great Graph documentation on how to call the Graph to actually get Teams links. And it's going to be returned, I think it's the online meeting resource. There's something called join web URL. Now, one thing that you might or might not know too is that if you're using something like Dataverse, or you're using a portal in front of your Dataverse, and you want to get to the join meeting, the majority of those Dataverse entities that relate to appointments and, appointments is the one, you'll actually have the join web URL. Sometimes it's embedded directly, but I think in most cases it's embedded inside the message that is sent, so you can actually extract that join web URL. Now, the cool thing about that is if you want to use that in combination with another service, like for example, in my banking scenario, we're using bookings behind the scenes. So we're actually making bookings calls to book an appointment with an available loan officer, so that when the bookings get created, it creates the appointment entry in the database. It creates a join web URL with a unique ID for the meeting and unique ID for the chat. And then that's really what I'm using on the front end on the portal to actually show the user how to get connected to that meeting. It's very straightforward. All right. So this is an example here for, let's say, our banking customers. You know, one of the things that we can do is I recently had to help some banking customers in Asia, where the regulation says that basically if a loan officer or financial advisor is meeting with a customer, that the meeting needs to be recorded, right? It's a governance and compliance issue here, that the meeting must be recorded. Now, if you know what Microsoft has done recently, it was for the best, right? They've decided to move all the recordings to use OneDrive instead of using Stream to store the recordings. The problem is for some of my customers in Asia who are relying on this ability to actually record meetings, now they've lost the control of those meetings, because it means that every user could potentially delete their meetings before it's moved somewhere safe. Well, the cool thing about this is that using Azure Communication Services and the approach that we've talked about, you can use things like an Azure Event Grid or like a webhook to get a triggered action when the meeting is ended, to go create an entry in a database somewhere, or to say the recorded media is ready to download. So this is an example here of me getting the access location, the content location for where the meeting, the download recorded or downloadable record made, you know what I mean. The media is available for download. And then this is an example here using the same content location of a little script that I wrote to go download things. Okay, so far I've talked about how you can leverage some of the Azure Communication Services and how you can get started with the samples. If you're like me, and I'll just use a gratuitous Simpsons analogy here, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen this episode, but Homer Simpson's tried to build a barbecue, and this is what the barbecue is supposed to look like. And this is kind of what it ends up looking like. I'm pretty much the same kind of person when I build applications. I have the full intention of making an application that looks awesome, but it rarely looks awesome because I'm not a user interface specialist. I'm a UX. I love user experience, but it doesn't mean that I do pretty interface. I just make maybe intuitive interfaces. So one of the things that we should talk about is that Azure Communication Services has an extensive UI library that's available for you. And the UI library makes it really easy for you to build like visual communication experiences that are consistent. And if you think about it, right, there's lots of moving pieces, right? So things like dynamic video galleries, like your user control, rendering the incoming chat, all that stuff, right? And you need to worry about things like accessibility, localization, and that's why the UI library is here. Now, if you just want an out-of-box kind of communication experience, you can just kind of drop the UI library composites. So it's basically like a combo pack, right? They've actually configured, here's all the most commonly used components together into a composite. You can just drop that in your application and you'll have that rich experience. But we'll also talk about the fact that you can use individual UI components to actually completely customize the experience to suit your needs, either to have your branding in there or to remove elements that you don't want people to use. So all those components are using the Fluent UI design language and assets. So it'll not only look good, but it'll look consistent with if you built, let's say, an Azure Communication Services inside of a web part, right? Or even inside of a Teams app if you wanted to. I know I'm going Inception here, but because it's using Fluent UI, it's going to be a consistent experience throughout. And that kind of allows you to deliver to that promise of building applications, right? Microsoft always talks about empowering every person on the planet. So that promise of making applications that are awesome looking, that are consistent, but also accessible. So let's show you some examples here of composites, right? So there's a composite called the call composite. And the call composite provides kind of that calling experience and allows users to start or join a call. And inside that experience, the users can do things like configure their devices and participate in the call with video and share their screen and, do all the stuff that you're familiar with in a Teams experience. So now the visual examples of call composite, in this case, this is like a typical Microsoft meeting, by the way, where nobody turns on their camera. But if they chose to turn on their camera and they were not particularly good at aiming their camera at their faces, this is kind of what it would look like. That might look familiar because that's actually what I use in my sample. Here's another kind of call composite that waits for me to be admitted. Now, when you do this, you're actually behind the scenes, you're using the Teams interrupt. I'm not even going to try to say the full word, the team interrupt experience, right? And the call composite just includes that lobby experience because it's provided by Teams itself. Now there's also a chat composite. And just like the call composite gives you that rich ability, things like, hey, someone's typing, or the support for emojis and support for avatars and all that cool stuff. That's actually built in again in a chat composite. So those are controls that are available to you. And just to show you how easy it is, I know that code probably looks scary, but if we skip all the stuff that has to do with setting up the call and everything, you'll see that how I call, and this is in a TypeScript or React, component, what I'm doing is I'm saying, okay, well, I'm going to have, a Fluent theme around inside of that. I'm going to have a call client provider, and I'm going to have an agent provider that's going to allow you to manage the calls. And in this case, I'm going to use just the calling components, the combo pack of all the calling components, so I don't have to worry about customizing it. If I wanted to add chat, I could have done that as well in here. Now, that was the composite components, but the composite components are made of something called the UI components. And that allows you to really get granular control over each and every component of the user experience with Azure Communication Services. So if you wanted to create your own custom video grid or remove buttons, that's usually the one that customers ask me the most, right? Oh, I don't want the customer to be able to share a document or share their screen. I just want them to be able to view documents that are shared by the loan officer. You can absolutely do that. So this is kind of the components of the call UI components, and these are the chat UI components. And you see there's all things like that typing indicator. That's a component that's available to you. All right, I got to wrap this up. So we got a whole bunch of things that are available here, right? Now you might say, well, okay, Hugo, you showed me how I can make the calls directly from the backend system. You've talked to me about UI components and some composites and stuff like that. Which one do I use? It really depends on how complex your solution is and how you want to customize it. But you'll notice that all these components kind of support the ability. Now you have the ability to customize kind of the look and feel. So this is the standard UI, and you can say, okay, I want it to be vertical. But what if you wanted to say, well, I want to be able to remove some components? You can absolutely do that. You can override the styles of the individual components to make it look like whatever you want. Now you can also it supports themes by default. And so if you wanted to brand it to match your corporate colors, you could actually go to the theme designer that's available as part of Fluent UI and design a theme that complies to your colors, and your app will automatically look and feel like it belongs to your organization. And if you want, you can override the themes as well, right? And if you want to use custom fonts, you can do that, as well as if you wanted to use custom labels throughout. So this is the out-of-the-box label. And by the way, there's built-in localization, right? So you can actually don't have to translate everything. And it works with longer labels. Or you can make up your own labels. And that's all done through kind of the built-in components as well. And then finally, the apps are designed to be accessible from the start. Accessibility should no longer be an afterthought in your app design. It should be the first thing you think about, and Azure Communication does all that for you. Okay, so when you go to Azure Communication Services, you have a quick start area. Pretty much every single thing that I've talked to you about today is covered in this. Maybe the thing that's not covered in here is some ideas of how to use these technologies in the sense of real world scenarios. And I encourage you to think about some of the craziest, coolest scenarios that you can come up with. Again, each one of these links take you to a quick start, which has your choice of platform, your choice of language, and has all the code for you to test it. So my call to action for you today is let's go out there. Let's look at how can we improve that user experience, both for our customers, our partners, and our employees. For example, I just built, well, not just, but recently built a vaccine attestation portal and a self-testing portal for COVID. Well, wouldn't it be great to have a link right there if I just tested positive and I'm kind of panicking to be able to call the nurse, the company nurse, and to talk to the company nurse directly or talk to a hotline and make sure that you're going to be okay. Let me walk you through what you need to do. Right? Those are that next level experience that we can do with very little effort, very little impact. And because of the pricing structure of Azure Communication Services, relatively low cost as well. So today I showed you how to use Azure Communication Services, how flexible and easy to use, and how you can do that in .NET, Node, JavaScript, mobile devices. I encourage you to go out and build some cool stuff with the chat and video and telephony. And don't forget that just because you're using something like the Power Platform doesn't mean that you can't play. Think about using PCF controls for that functionality. That's it for me. I would love it if you could rate my session. Make sure that I get the opportunity to speak again in these sessions. Thank you, everyone, for your time.